Today's Frugal Friday video is for one of my favorite patterns of all time. This is the Salty Sailor Mini Ditty bag. This is from the designer Needle and Anchor. I found this pattern way back when I first started sewing and I have not stopped sewing it. So I've been sewing this pattern probably from when it first came out, making several a year. I'm probably the person who has made the most of this pattern because it's quick, easy, fun, and I think it's great for gift giving. I currently have 4 of these that I use in my home on a regular basis, and I think I'm going to keep this one for myself. If you decide to give this as gift, the things I like to put in these are a nice pair of fuzzy socks, some candles, candies, lip balm, lotion, things like that. Just make it a really nice, fun gift. If you are using a non-directional print, you really only have to cut out 7 pieces plus your interfacing. I'm using a directional print, so I have to cut out 4 of this shape, 1 of my base pieces, and then 4 of my side pieces. If you were using a non-directional print, you would only cut out 2 of the full length pieces, 1 exterior and 1 lining. As you can see for my version, I'm using all the same print. This is a cotton canvas from Retro Stitch. So since this is a cotton canvas, I did add a layer of woven interfacing on all the pieces. So for these side pieces, what I did was I used the measurement given in the pattern and I drew that line all the way across. I also drew on my seam allowance. For this piece, I have to do a couple things and I do not want anything in the seam allowance on this. This is going to be your hardest step whenever you attach this side piece to the body, and I don't want any extra bulk in there. So to prep this piece, what I will do is I will take this raw edge and I'll fold it down to that line I drew. Now I'm going to do this on all 4 pieces so that it'll look like this. But I'm going to take my glue stick, just a regular Elmer's glue stick, and I'm going to run it across here and then iron this down. So I'm going to go off camera to do that for all 4 of these pieces. But before I go and do that, I'm going to show you how, if you're using a directional print, how you attach those 2 pieces together. If your print's non-directional, you don't have to do this extra step, so this pattern's even easier. But for the non-directional, I want the prints to be going in the right way on both sides. So I'll end up cutting out 4 pieces, 2 exterior, 2 lining. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew them along this straight line here. I'm going to flip these right sides together, matching up that straight line. And then I'm just going to sew down this straight edge with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I sewed that seam together. Now there's no need to top stitch it because what you're going to do is you're going to go over to the iron and press it flat and just get a really good press on it. If it's not laying flat, you could use double-sided tape or even a glue stick here to make this seam lay flat. So this will probably be my exterior piece, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a piece of fleece onto it. I want to keep that fleece out of the seam allowance, so I'll actually take the time to draw on my seam allowance so I can make sure it stays out of it. The exterior piece is your only piece that's going to get the fleece on it. You're going to repeat those same steps with your lining to sew them together, but you do not need to add fleece to it. But what you can do with this one is after you have yours sewn together and iron flat, you can go ahead and add your snaps, your magnetic snaps to this piece. I'm using prong snaps for mine, so I'll need to attach them to the lining before I sew the lining and the exterior together. If you are using riveted snaps, you wouldn't need to do that. You could wait till the very end and add them after you complete the bag to its entirety. So I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to sew up this lining piece. I'm going to add the fleece to this exterior, and I'll get all the side pieces prepped. While off camera, I took all 4 of my side pieces, the 2 exteriors, 2 linings, and then I folded this piece down from the top to match that line that the pattern gives. I used a glue stick to secure mine, so all 4 of these are ready. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip these right sides together, clip an exterior and a lining right sides together. You won't start sewing here at the top though. You'll start sewing a little bit down. The pattern tells you how far down to start sewing, but you'll start sewing there, backstitch, and then go all the way around with the seam allowance given in the pattern. you'll stop that same amount away from this side that you started on this side. Sometimes it's easier on this part to draw on your seam allowances if you're still getting used to sewing around curves, just to help you keep everything lined. After you sew both of these together, you'll sew the other two side pieces together too, and then you will trim down that seam allowance with your pinking shears. If you don't have pinking shears, you could just make some tiny snips in the curves to kind of help it lay better. Here's how the two sets of side pieces look. Once you have both sets of the side pieces sewn, a lining and exterior sewn right sides together, you can go ahead and use your pinking shears and trim up the seam allowance. If you don't have them, just do snips in your curve. Turn these right sides out and give a really good press. I'll do that off camera and I'll come back to top stitch them. Now we have our exterior piece that has the fleece attached. I kept the fleece out of my seam allowance. And then I also have my lining piece that I was going to add my magnetic snaps to using the pattern measurements. And in my templates, it just has the mark, so I can just place them on there. Now what I want to do is I want to place this right sides together with the exterior. It doesn't matter which side goes with which because it's all the same basically. If you wanted to add a tag or a label, you would want to do it on your exterior or lining before this step. You could do it after and you would just see your threads on the lining side, not a big deal. Add some clips to this piece just to make sure everything stays together when you're sewing it. You're going to start sewing at the top. Backstitch here and then go all the way around using that seam allowance in the pattern. When you come back here, you'll stop here, leaving an opening that is wide enough for you to turn it through. Definitely make sure you come in enough on the curves so you do not have to turn this through a curve. We want to make sure that we leave the opening on the straight side. After you have the exterior and the lining sewn right sides together, you're just going to use those pinking shears again to trim up maybe about half of the seam allowance all along the parts that you sewed. You will not do any trimming right here where the opening is because we will use that extra to tuck in this raw edge after we turn it right sides out. So trim, then turn it right sides out, press it flat, and then we'll come back here for the next steps with this piece too. Before I go off camera, I do want to show you this base piece. You cut out your base piece according to that pattern piece. Then you will have a separate pattern piece for the stabilizer. You can use Peltex or Decaville Heavy. After you center that on this base piece, what you will do is you will go over to the iron, and the pattern recommends, just like I do, to use a glue stick. And so it's going to look like this. You're going to fold it down right in that crease. So you're going to fold where that Decaville Heavy or Peltex is and just fold it down. So it's naturally pretty easy to do that because that Decaville Heavy or Peltex will just serve as a guide. You don't do that on the short ends, just on the two long ends. I want to do this step off camera too. While I was pressing everything flat, I of course remembered that this is supposed to go on the exterior before you sew this right sides together. I'm not too worried about it. I was wanting to keep this for myself anyway. Now I definitely have to, since I'll have a raw edge on this side. It's not going to cause too much problems because it is finished with interfacing and Decaville. You won't be able to see anything really. It'd just be a small peak of a raw edge there, but honestly, it's okay. So, as a recap, before you sew your exterior and your lining right sides together, center this base piece onto your exterior. You're going to center it wrong sides down, so you're looking at the right sides of both the exterior and this base piece, and then you just sew all around. I'm going to go ahead and attach it and sew all the way around it. It's just mine is supposed to be done before I attach the lining. So now that I have that centered, I'm going to sew all around it with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Making that simple mistake just lets you know how even if you've sewn a pattern so many times, you can still forget steps and have to do corrections on it. I don't think I've ever sewn a pattern, and definitely not made a tutorial where I've never made a mistake in it. It's just the way it goes. So now this is the exterior with that base attached. Here is the lining with the magnetic snaps. I want to top stitch all around this, sitting here at the top, so I'm just going to start there and go 1/8 of an inch around it. The last step we're going to do is attach those side pieces. I have these side pieces sewn right sides together, turned and pressed them flat. Everything looks great. Before I attach them to this piece, I'm going to top stitch along the top edge of both of them. So just about 1/8 of an inch away. That'll close the top, and it'll also have a nice finished look. After you top stitch, go ahead and find the center of the bottom of this side piece. For your lining exterior, if you ended up doing like I did and had directional prints and sewed them in the middle, it's easy to have the center of this because it's marked with that seam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lining right sides together, so the lining side and the lining of this main piece right sides together, or lining sides together. And then you're just going to clip the bottom in place. I'm going to use this big clip just so it doesn't slip around. So we clip along that straight edge. Then what we have to do is we have to start clipping along this curve. So you can see I'm just rolling this up and I'm going to match. I want them perfectly flush there. This is why I like to leave extra interfacing out of this area, because I feel like it gets really bulky here. So I want to start just rolling this up, matching that seam. I'm going to try my best to keep it as flush as possible. Take it all the way up until your side piece ends. Then let's do the same thing on this other side. Wrap it around so we're just curving, adding a clip, and keeping everything in line. Those edges are staying perfectly in line. This is how the side piece looks. Now I'm going to tell you, the pattern designer does not tell you to do this, but I have to glue this in place. There is no way I can sew it without it looking just horrible if I don't glue it. If you're someone that's a great sewist, great, you can do that. That's wonderful. It's not me. I'm just not. You could try to staple it if you're someone that uses staple, double-side tape, whatever you like to do, but for me, it is glued in place. So what I do is I run a thin line of glue all the way around this in between these two pieces. So I'll just pull them apart and put some glue and then clip it back together. I will let this set both sides. I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the other side, and I'll set this aside and let it dry really good, maybe about 10 minutes. And then I'll come back on camera. Of course, I'm not going to glue it on camera, but I will sew it on camera. But then I can come back, and when I take the clips off, it stays in place. Otherwise, when I'm trying to sew this, these clips keep coming off and things keep shifting. It's just almost impossible. But the pattern designer, I'm sure she is much more skilled and she doesn't need to do that, but I do have to do it. So I'm going to go off camera, glue both of these side pieces on, and then we'll come back on, top stitch around, and then that's it. Our bag is done. The bottom piece doesn't look bad. It is my fault. I'm going to show you whenever I come back and we finish this one I just did for my daughter. And I'll show you how it looks and how the bottom looks on it, just so you have a better frame of reference of how the bottom would look better the other way. But you can see how beautiful this already looks. But let's go ahead and get those sides clipped so we can finish up our bag. So I've got both sides glued on and they're completely dry, so I can go ahead and take my clips off because it's stable enough without it, and that'll let me get a really good sew without worrying about the clips. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the exterior on the bed of my machine. Just going to shift that top part over a little. And I'm going to sew all around that side with just an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When I come to that curve there, I'm putting my finger in there to make sure I have it flat. Whenever I sew around that curve part, that is the trickiest spot. Again, I'm going to use my finger, push down on that curve just to keep it nice and smooth. So this is that first side. You can see it's not perfectly lined up. That's a little bit out there, but for the most part, it's pretty good. Let's go ahead and do that other side. Same way, just 1/8 of an inch. So my Salty Sailor mini ditty bag is done. Look how cute this is. I love the shape of it. I love how it opens up really nice and wide. Everything is great. I did mess up the bottom, we know that, but look at those sides. The gluing, I don't know how you could do that without gluing and get it that perfectly, but I love it. But you can see the bottom doesn't look bad, but I'm going to show you how the other one looks that I made. This one's going to be my daughter's, or it's going to be one of my daughter's birthday gifts tomorrow, but you can see the bottom here looks a lot better than the one over there. It's okay, not a big deal. This one has candles in it already for her. I've made her a couple other gifts, but this one is one that I know she's going to love, because even though she gets to use the candles inside there, she gets this bag too. So this fabric is from K&A Custom Fabrics. This fabric is from Retro Stitch. Both of these are a cotton canvas. I pretty much use only cotton canvas these days if I can, just because I love the feel. It feels a little bit more sturdy, but it's not like too stiff like a vinyl. That's great on my machine. So this pattern is from Needle and Anchor. It is a free pattern. I'm going to put the link for this pattern in my description. Put a link for these fabrics in my description. This pattern also is one that isn't very expensive to make, because you don't need a lot of materials and the only hardware is 2 magnets. You could use cam snaps, but that is one reason why I made so many of these in the beginning, because I was still kind of uncomfortable with the zipper, and this was the perfect way. And plus for craft shows, I can make them relatively cheaply and I can sell them at a decent price, especially if I go ahead and add some things in there like candy, lotion, soaps, whatever. When I sell these at a craft show, it already gives people the ideas, and some people like to buy them already stuffed as a pre-made gift. Such a fun pattern. I hope you guys love this pattern as much as I do. I hope you use it as much as I do. So right now I've been sewing like one every week just because I've been into it since I got the templates. I'm really wanting to make more of these, but try them out. You don't need the templates. They are not necessary. The pattern comes with the pattern pieces, so it isn't hard to cut out or anything like that. So definitely try this pattern out. Let me know what you think about it, and let me know if you're still enjoying the Frugal Friday series. I've been having a lot of fun just making free patterns, especially some that I've made for years that I really like. I think this is a great way to remind us how we can make beautiful things in our sewing room without spending lots of money. Thanks so much for watching another tutorial of mine, and I hope you have a wonderful day today.